What's up, guys? Welcome to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Palantir stock, ticker symbol PLTR, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Tuesday, March 12th. Alright guys, Palantir stock here today, down about 69 cents a share. That's minus 2.65% after quite the opening pump there, but then we did get a fade. So let's start here by taking a look at our daily ritual, our volume profile analysis here on what I think is the best chart to do so on, the 5-minute chart. By the way, listen, if you guys are looking to try to expedite your trading journey, I think you'll find our private trading group. It's also an educational resource at the link in the pinned comment. I think you'll find it extremely helpful. You can go ahead and get grandfathered in at the current rate so that, you'll pay the same price as the price goes up over time. I've been working with that group for over 3 years now strong. Hope to see you join. Now, the volume profile. What I'm looking for here, and if you've been watching these, you kind of know what I'm looking for, right? I want big changes in volume that are not contextual to what is typically expected that time of day, but it also, of course, has to correlate with an obvious move in stock price. So, I'm really interested in this pump and fade off the open, this little pump and fade a little bit into the morning, and then kind of that little fade into the close. Okay, not a tremendously volatile day for Palantir here, as far as overall percentage move on the day, but of course that was broken up by these little intraday pumps in the morning. So let's take a look at those. And let's go left to right here, from open to close. So, that opening pump and fade. For me, I'm looking at this and it was actually interesting. We got a couple of consecutive and consistently high volume candles off the open, green candles. Because typically you'll see that first candle be quite a bit higher than that second 5-minute candle in terms of volume, but it actually held up relatively well. You guys know me. I like to see at least 3 or 4 in a row. We just weren't able to see that today because we topped out and started to fade a little too early for that to occur. Of course, asking for a 15 to 20 minute pump off the open is a little less likely, of course, but I do like to see that ideally. Just in terms of those consecutive candles to really pull some definitive big sample size opinion out of the market here. Now, interestingly though, we did have, again, for context, we do expect kind of a U-shape in terms of volume, just on most stocks with plenty of volume on any regular day. But we did see some consecutive selling volume, right? Some consistent on consecutive red bars. However, we saw such a drop-off from those green bars. It was, if these red bars were consistently 2.5 million, 4 in a row, or around that region, I think that would be a much more definitive stance as the morning goes on. You would typically expect less volume. But for me, this is so within context that I can't really sit here and say that, hey, listen, the bear is a much bigger sample size, agreed with that downside move. So let's move on from that. I think that open is kind of a wash in terms of the volume profile analysis. Now, this next move that we saw here, heading into the morning, that pump and fade, again, this was essentially an equal move. We essentially ended up at a net neutral position. And by looking at the volume profile, we can start to learn these moves aren't always created equal. It's not necessarily net neutral. For example, if we saw a bunch of selling volume on these 5 red consecutive candles, and it was double consistently the buying volume on the upside move, then we're not really at a net neutral point by the end of it, are we? I mean, in terms of price, sure, but in terms of market sentiment, the sample size is telling us something much different. In terms of the volume profile here today, though, that's well within reason for context on the day, so that is not the case here. And now, finally, on this fade into the close here, this downside fade, bears, you're looking for big volume that's out of context? Sorry, that's well within context. So bears, sorry I had some better news for you today, but honestly, this volume profile analysis, it's kind of a wash. So let's move on. I think it's incredibly important to still look at this every day, because even when we're not really able to pull anything definitive out of the analysis, it's important to understand that, in case the move was in your favor and you think it was much stronger than maybe it was, or it went against you and you were worried that it was a lot stronger than perhaps the move actually was when you dig into the volume. Now, let's move on here and take a look at the self-fulfilling prophecy psychological levels that I'm going to be paying extremely close attention to on a variety of charts here tomorrow. Now, over the weekend, we discussed this one here, and we were right in between this channel, in between the 200 period and the 50 period here on the 30-minute chart. We now find ourselves inside of that exact same channel, however, at the lower region. We did attempt a couple of times actually, to break upside above that 50 period. You know, no cigar here today, unfortunately. And then we did fade as the volume kind of dried up a little bit after the morning session, right into the close, sitting now closing upon a test of that 200 period. So listen, bulls here tomorrow. What I'm primarily looking at, priority number one, hold that gray line, the 200 period moving average. Again, it's a common moving average on a very common time frame. It's not magic, right? I'm not looking at it in that regard. I'm looking at this because other people are looking at this and making decisions around it. So bulls, I would love to see that 200 period hold tomorrow. Any downside test, a hard high volume bounce up toward that 50 period would be ideal. And then bulls, a beautiful day here on the 30-minute chart would not only be that, but an actual reclaim of that 50 period, which is about 2.25% away right now. An upside move through that 50 period, a retest, and a clean high volume bounce away from that, reclaiming what we were unable to do so today. Bears, you would ideally like to see that 50 period getting below 26 bucks a share tomorrow, as low as possible. Any upside test, hard, high volume rejection away, but really your primary objective here tomorrow, Tuesday, is to get down through the 200 period. You know, I think a lot of people just want to see clean breaks and runs. I like to see retests to give no doubt to the market if it's supporting my bias. So bears, you guys would want to see a break downside through the 200 period, a lower volume retest, right? And then a high volume rejection pulling downside down toward that $25 region. Now, moving on to the 4 hour, let's see if the 4 hour is in play, and it is absolutely in play here. So let's talk about this. We are now getting closer and closer to that white line. That's the 50 period moving average, a very common moving average on an incredibly common chart. This is one of the most popular charts that the world's going to be looking at here on any stock, really, but Palantir as well. In the world. A very popular chart with a very popular moving average, so we have to pay attention. It's about a 1.1% downside move away for a retest of that 50 period. Now listen, bulls, something that we talked about is ideally getting that 50 period above the $25 region, which today we actually did. That's a great thing to see. You're beefing up that already existing psychological level, adding another psychological barrier to that region, beefing it up a little bit. So bulls, any downside test, you're going to want to see a hard bounce away to the upside, away from that 50 period. And bears, you know what you're looking for, a hard high volume breakdown through clean, and then a retest and rejecting off of 25 bucks a share. Okay, because that 50 period is likely to remain slightly above 25 bucks a share here, even on a downside move, at least in the very, very short term. I'm talking like 1 day before it curls over, okay, if we were to see a downside move at all. All right, now on to the most important chart of all. That's going to be the daily, right? You can see here that we're pulling downside away from that recent high of 2750. And you'll also notice that these moving averages are not even relevant here in the short term. The 50 period's the closest one. It's below 2050. So looking at this daily, what becomes the most obvious story? And the more charts you'll look at, or you do look at over your career, the more the easier you'll start to be able to recognize what the obvious story is, what other people must be thinking. In this case, it's pretty obvious to me. 25 bucks is the story here tomorrow. Bulls, you guys don't want to give up 25 bucks a share, at least ideally, and at least in the short term. All right, long term, of course, the fundamentals take over. I'm on board with that. But in the very short term, these are the things that we absolutely have to pay attention to. 25 is not only an obvious psychological level, it has proved itself as a technical level. That 25 to 2550 region has become a technical range. So bulls, come tomorrow here. Best case scenario, close above 2550, even 26 would be beautiful. Okay, because that puts another level in between the 25 to 2550 range, getting above 26. But just a close above 2550 would be a wonderful close out of Palantir, getting us up above that range. Again, wonderful in the short term. Bears, you're interested in cracking down back into the 24s, getting below that, the entirety of that range. A downside break of 25. Any retest is welcome of 25 bucks. But, and again, it's not an exact penny, but in a macro scale, a hard high volume rejection of about 25 bucks a share is what you bears are after here tomorrow. Implied volatility is still sitting, we bounced a little bit here today, but it's still sitting relatively low in comparison to the last few months. So understand that the lower IV is in comparison to the intended trade time frame of a trader's mindset, like how long are they looking for this trade to last? The lower IV is in comparison to that time frame. the more attractive conditions are to be purchasing contracts. That goes for both calls and puts, by the way. Now, my favorite part of the video here, every single day, let's take a look. What was the bias out of the options traders on Palantir here today as we head into tomorrow? We had 373,000 total contracts traded. That's a pretty good sample size. We can get some good data out of there. 263,500 calls, 109,750 puts approximately. And as is typical here on Palantir, every single delta range is leaning call heavy. We have seen heavy call put ratios, heavy call side bias on the overall call put ratios out of Palantir for like weeks and weeks and weeks, almost every single day. At the same time, we've also seen every delta range call side heavy basically every day for weeks. I do not necessarily expect that to last forever, of course. Eventually, everything kind of has to come back to equilibrium. However, this has been a very common trend on Palantir, so I'm just remaining aware of that the options chain on Palantir, for some reason, it is just leaning much more call side heavy than almost any other security I'm looking at with decent volume. But as always, listen, understand the option traders can be wrong, so this is one factor of many. Ensure that your risk is always managed. Listen, don't forget to cast your vote in the comment section down below for tomorrow's wildcard stock. Just comment the ticker or the name of the company. Whichever one gets the most comments from today's batch of video, I will cover for tomorrow's wildcard stock. Also, if you got value out of this video, please subscribe to the channel. I greatly appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.